In this episode of the Courageous Public Health Podcast, Dr. Wari Allison reflects on what it means to choose the road less traveled, even when the familiar path feels safer. From changing medical specialties midway through her training, to becoming both a physician and scientist, to adopting her children as a single mother, Wari shares how some of life's most meaningful opportunities begin when we're willing to step into the unknown. This conversation explores courage, integrity, purpose, leadership, and what becomes possible when we trust ourselves enough to take a path that others might not choose. You're listening to the Courageous Public Health Podcast, episode 67.
To all the courageous women leading in public health, this podcast is your space to turn up the volume on your courage. This space centers your voice. This space celebrates your passion. This space amplifies your courage. My role? To listen, to amplify, and to stand with you in the fight for equity. My name is Dr. Christy McClamrock. I am an epidemiologist, consultant, the founder and CEO of Courageous Public Health, and the host of the Courageous Public Health Podcast. Each week, I have real, unfiltered conversations with women in public health about the challenges you face, the power you hold, and your vision for the future. We talk about the authenticity, vulnerability, and courage that you bring, not just to public health, but to every part of your lives. Because courage is about action, even in fear. It's about taking up space, leading unapologetically, refusing to be erased, and knowing you never have to do it alone. If you're ready to turn up the volume on your courage, if you're ready to take up space, if you're ready to smash the racist, patriarchal, cisnormative, heteronormative, ableist, capitalistic systems, then listen to this new episode.
Welcome to the Courageous Public Health Podcast. I'm Dr. Christy McClamrock. Most of us expect our lives and careers to follow a fairly predictable path. And then sometimes something happens. A door closes, an opportunity appears, a diagnosis changes everything. Or we simply realize that the path we've been following is no longer the one we want to take. Whatever brings us to that moment, we're faced with a choice. Stay on the familiar path or find the courage to step in a different direction. Through Courageous Public Health, I partner with leaders and organizations to create space for exactly these kinds of conversations, because navigating complexity often begins with having the courage to imagine a different way forward. Today's conversation is with Dr. Wari Allison. She is a physician, scientist, executive leader, elected to fellowship in both the American College of Physicians and the Infectious Diseases Society of America. She helps people to purposefully step into non-traditional paths to rewrite the rules on their own terms by providing tools, frameworks, strategy, and lived experience insight to navigate roads less traveled successfully and with their health and well-being as a priority. Dr. Allison is committed to mentorship, teaching, workforce development, and support. She is additionally passionate about innovative solutions that transform access to healthcare. Besides providing clinical care, her federally funded work includes conceptualizing and implementing a designated special project of national significance to cure hepatitis C in people of color with HIV, a national rural telementoring training center, and a project to integrate the national HIV curriculum e-learning platform into health professions programs. Here's my conversation with Dr. Wari Allison. Hi, everybody. Okay, so I want to start by just letting everyone who's listening know that today is Juneteenth, and I am really excited to have Dr. Wari Allison here to talk today on the podcast as a way to honor the importance of today. So hi, Wari, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me here today.
So happy to have you. We had to figure out our schedules, but we did. We made it work. I always love it when it works. And it worked for today. So that's perfect. I want to we have a shout out that we want to do. You want to do the honors, Wari?
Yeah, I want to really honor, Dr. Sharon Dorcas. Dorcas, did I pronounce that right?
Dorku.
Dorku, there we go. Dr. Sharon Dorku, who introduced us. I mean, she's just an awesome person. She introduced me to you, and this opportunity came up. So absolutely want to shout her out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that Sharon actually connected us before she did her podcast interview, which I was really touched by that. That she was, yes, absolutely, her authenticity. Okay, we're going to pause because the light in the hallway just went out. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to go do this in the hallway. Okay, so let's get started by having you introduce yourself to our listeners.
Yes, I'm Wari Allison. I'm a physician, scientist, executive, but I'm a lot more than that. I'm a mom, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a friend, I'm a writer, I'm a musician, I'm a storyteller. Yeah.
Love it. Love it. Writer, musician, storyteller. I am also a writer, musician, and storyteller. So I love that we share those things. Something to talk about later for sure. So I want to get right to it. Let's start talking about courage. I think it's always important to kind of frame this first question around courage, and to remind our listeners that there's a difference between courage and bravery. So bravery is taking action without fear, whereas courage is taking action despite fear. And I think that the fear is important, right? The fear is important that allows us to then be courageous. So can you share with us some experiences from your personal life, from your professional life, when you acted courageously?
Yeah, so, in my professional life, I have, often taken what I call a non-traditional path. A road less traveled, if you like. And medicine is a very traditional profession. And so, a real inflection point for me is actually, it's 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I was in the middle of emergency medicine training, 3/4 of the way through actually in Australia. And I suddenly realized this wasn't a specialty for me. And made a decision that I wanted to change specialties, but I didn't know what to. And it's not something that's done often in medicine. Even if people make the wrong choices in that respect, I think they just keep going. Yeah. And so it was an important point in my career because it's what led me to public health, and it's what led me to infectious disease, which ultimately ended up being my chosen specialty. I fell back on research, which was something that I'd fallen in love with as an undergrad. And so I started on a Master's of Public Health by Research, and the work that I was doing was in Papua New Guinea, developing a diagnostic clinical algorithm for pediatric HIV. And I transferred to doing a PhD. I just loved it. I just loved the work. I loved going to PNG, to Papua New Guinea. I loved working with the pediatric department at Port Moresby General Hospital. I loved the sense of community. I loved doing work that, it was my first experience of work that ended up translating into policy. And I fell in love with infectious disease. And that's very backwards, right? Most physician scientists know what their specialty is and do research in that area. But for me, it was completely backwards. I did the research and that led me to infectious disease. And so I retrained, and it's taking 100 steps backwards to take 10 steps forward. But that required a lot of courage, right? To make that decision and to do that. I have no regrets at all. some would say, or some might think, oh gosh, it's time wasted. I was certainly the last person in my medical school class to qualify in my specialty for sure. But 20 years later, the time is almost irrelevant, right?
Yes.
The retrospective look back, the time is irrelevant, and so I'm where I want to be, doing what I want to do. Having a great skill set in public health, loving the work I do in infectious disease, both research and clinical, and so that required a lot of courage.
Yeah, it's so I feel like I know other MD PhDs, but a lot of them do them like as a combined program. Mm-hmm. You might be the first person that I've met who did an MD and then did a PhD as like separate pieces. And that's an investment, right? That's an investment in time and energy. And I love that you said, now that the time that it took to do that, it's irrelevant. That's something that I try to remind my daughter about. She's 20 and she's, had a couple years after high school and hasn't started college yet. And sometimes, feels like, oh, I'm behind and I've missed this time. And I'm like, I know it feels that way right now. I totally get it. And in the long run, it is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And you've spent your time dealing with other things that also needed to be dealt with. So I think that's really such a great perspective.
And it grows you as a person. I think when you're 18, another thing that I did that was a little bit different. So in the UK, most people go to medical school straight out of high school at 18. Yeah. And I ended up doing medicine as a graduate degree, which again is unusual. And at the time, I was like, I was devastated I didn't get into medical school the first time. Yeah. But again, the power of that retrospective view, the person that I was when I entered medical school at 22 as opposed to the person that I was at 18 was just a more serious person, was just a more focused person, was
Absolutely.
just right? I think my medical school experience was better just being a wee bit older. And so, again, at the time, I thought it was the end of the world when I was 18 and I didn't get in right then. But looking back, it was the best thing. And I wouldn't have discovered research if I'd gone to medical school at 18. I wouldn't have had the summer jobs I had in my undergrad that led to me loving research and being exposed to research. And so everything happens for a reason. And
yeah, that's great. And I think, all these things that you're talking about that you did sort of differently from the norm or the usual path. All of those things take courage, right? Because doing it differently can be scary for lots of reasons. So I think those are great examples of that's a great example of courage. Do you have any other examples that you want to share?
Yeah, I guess a personal example, the biggest personal example of courage was my decision to adopt both my kids as a single parent. I like using the analogy, off-road hiking, to this tendency that I have to do things that are just not on the beaten track. And certainly, adopting as a single parent is in that realm. And so again, took a lot of courage to make that decision. But it's the greatest privilege of my life to be their mom. They bring so much joy to me. They're what matters most. I do a lot of things that matter, but they're what matters most. And so, yes, that's another example of courage, right? Courage to do something different.
Yeah. I think that adopting by itself takes courage, but then adopting as a single mom, like double courage there.
Right.
Yeah. How old are your kids?
So I've got a 6, nearly 7-year-old and a 2-year-old.
Oh, okay. Okay. So yeah. All right. So your youngest one is still pretty little.
It's still pretty little. Yes.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So how do you think what do you think led you to be a person who takes all these courageous steps? Do you have any thoughts about that? Because you're talking about all the way through kind of doing the off-road trek.
Yeah, the off-trail hiking, the
off-trail hiking. Skiing. Thank you. I knew that wasn't the right phrase.
Or off-piste skiing, or whatever you like. Or whatever you like to call it. I think a lot of it has to do with how I was brought up, and my parents never saying you can't, and I think that's a really valuable thing to instill in a child, that thought that there isn't anything you can't do. You may have to work hard to achieve it, to get there, and it may be a process to get there, but you are not incapable of doing it. And so I think that has a lot to do with the type of person I am, in that, there isn't really anything that you can tell me that I can't do. I may have to work on it, or I may have to learn about it, or I may have to upskill to do it.
Yeah. But, or you may not even want to do it.
Right. I may not even want to do it,
but it's not that you can't.
I tend not to think that. I tend to think I'm capable of doing it. Should I put my mind to it and put the work in? Because sometimes that's what it takes, right? You have to put the work in. I think that has, I give my parents credit a lot for that.
And then you get to turn around and be a parent who does that for your kids, I assume.
I hope so.
Yeah. I mean, as someone thinking a lot about courage and courageous leadership, and also being a parent, I do think that not only are there opportunities for us to recognize our own courage and start to be more intentional about being courageous moving forward, there are also opportunities for those of us who are parents to be thinking about how we can support courage as a skill, not just a trait, but as a skill that our children get to also develop. So, thank you I kind of threw that question in without any warning.
That's okay.
Thanks for going down that road with me. I really appreciate it.
That's okay.
So let's shift gears a little bit. I think that, courage is also so much about authenticity and claiming and expressing your power. And it's especially true when you're in spaces where people don't always welcome it. And so I'd really love to hear about your experiences in those kind of spaces, and sort of how do you express and embody your courage?
Yeah, you're a writer, I'm a writer, and I think people who are writers are not careless with our words, right? And so, values aren't neutral, and integrity is one of both my leadership and personal values. And what is it? What is integrity? I think it's thrown around a lot. Integrous leadership, right? It's thrown around a lot, but integrity is having really strong moral principles and there are many different definitions, but this is the one I like.
Sure.
And
Yes.
an unwavering commitment, right, to doing the right thing, even when no one is looking. And so having integrity is both a personal and leadership and professional value. It comes for me from different places. It comes from a very strong personal faith. I have a strong personal faith in God, but it also comes from watching my dad. My dad passed away last year, less than a year ago. And, I watched him, thank you. I watched him, I must have been about 12, make a career decision that was grounded in integrity and truth, that had consequences for him. It meant that he had to change jobs. It meant that we had to move. But I watched him hold to truth and integrity and pay the cost of that, both personally and professionally. And so, I am very much my father's daughter. And I've been around long enough. I'm over half a century old. I've been around long enough to have walked that walk and paid that price. And I think therein lies the challenge, right? Yes. I feel that integrity, truth, and courage are three things that dance to the beat of the same drum, right? Integrity often requires courage. Courage looks to integrity to guide someone or guide me or whoever in your choice, because it's always a choice, about what is worth fighting for. And the truth is, in my opinion, always, worth fighting for. So when you think about courageous public health that is rooted in integrity and truth, I think it does have a cost. And not everyone is willing to pay it. So for me, I express and embody courage by choosing to just have unshakable integrity. That is my superpower.
That is your superpower. Yes. That's beautiful.
But it doesn't come without a cost.
Yeah, I think it's so important to acknowledge that there are maybe I shouldn't say always. I think it's important to acknowledge that there are consequences to our courage, because if there weren't consequences, we probably wouldn't be afraid, and then we wouldn't need courage in the first place. I think that's a beautiful, I think there's a really beautiful, powerful connection to today being Juneteenth and what you're talking about. That, there have been historically great consequences for people to act courageously. And the people who have stayed in their integrity and acted courageously despite the fear and despite the consequences, I mean, they've moved the world forward, right?
It changes the world.
It changes the world.
It changes the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. In that moment, the cost may be high. In that moment, the cost may be high. But, it's worth it for the future, right? It's worth it. It's always worth it.
So many people have actually given their lives to stay in integrity. Yeah, I gotta breathe into that. That's powerful stuff. So let's talk about your vision, Wari. I'm so excited to hear about what your vision is for the future, and the vision for public health and the vision for yourself, and just all of the vision.
All of the vision.
All of the visions.
Let's talk about the future of public health first of all. I think, when I think about the future of public health, it's with this real deep awareness that we are living in consequential times, right? And what are consequential times? I think I love that we're having this conversation on Juneteenth, right? Those were consequential times. Yes. 1865, right? We just come out of a civil war, the emancipation from slavery, the years leading up to Juneteenth, the years after it. Those are consequential times. And, for public health, I think we are living in what is the biggest shakeup in public health, in healthcare, in research in the United States in a generation or two or three. And so when I think of the future of public health, what happens in these consequential times are going to set that future. Yeah. And I think in such a time as this, my vision and hope is that as individuals, as leaders, as organizations, we don't lose sight of humanity in public health. And we don't lose sight of the people and the communities that public health exists to serve. And so that is my hope for the vision of what the future of public health looks like, while at the same time recognizing that there are hard decisions to be made. There's courage to be gathered at an individual level, at an institutional level, at an organizational level, at a policy level. There's that saying, right? If you fall for something, or if you don't stand for something, you fall for anything.
Yes.
But I actually think that in consequential times, it's less about what you stand for and more about what you will not stand for, right? What you will not align yourself with, what you will not put your name to, what you will not, right? What you will not do, I think sometimes is more important than fighting the fight, what you're going to fight for, right? Yeah. And that ends up being more important. I've already mentioned I have a 6, nearly 7-year-old, and that's an age where you talk a lot about choices. We have a lot of conversations about making choices and about good choices.
Yes.
And I think the future of public health will be shaped by choices that are made at an individual level, at an organizational level, at a policy level. And I hope for good ones. And if they're not good ones, I hope that there are enough good ones to outweigh the bad ones.
Oh, yes. Yes. I've been playing around with this idea recently, just thinking about where do I want to go in terms of public health and in terms of creative public health. And the phrase that I keep coming back to is reimagining public health as deeply human. And I think that's what you're talking about. Yeah.
And, my personal vision in that, I talked at the beginning about what matters most. I want to retain my focus on what matters most, my kids. Yes. But there's a lot of things that matter to me.
Yeah.
And I think, being an older mom and having young kids, even when I think about what matters most, they matter most. I also recognize that as a leader in public health and medicine, as a physician, scientist, executive leader, what I do and what I have influence on in public health and medicine affects them and their generation. And so there's a responsibility still, beyond them, to this idea of what I do matters. And so it's kind of connected, what matters most, what matters still,
Yes.
And then I talked a lot about how I've often taken this road less traveled, gone off on a, off trail or off road. And I think a lot of people want to do that, but don't find the courage to do it. Or sometimes it's not a choice, right? It's sometimes circumstances happen and you find yourself on the road, at the crossroads. Yeah. And it's not a choice of yours. You've been laid off or, made redundant or whatever it is, or you've lost your grant or whatever it is. And sometimes you're at a crossroads, and are you going to try and claw your way back to the same thing that you've always done? Or are you going to widen your view and be confident in your skill set that can do so many different things and step off road and be surprised by what you may find about yourself and about the things that you can do. I love these analogies of off-trail hiking and off-piste skiing, or I think in America they say backcountry skiing, because the people that do that, they do it because they always do it because it requires greater skill. It requires greater skill to ski off-piste. It requires greater skill to go off-trail hiking. So they're very skilled people.
Yes.
They do it because they get to see things that you don't see on the groomed trail, on the right. You get to see things that you've never seen before. And, again, taking a ski analogy, that untouched powder, right? It's going somewhere where snow hasn't been groomed to conform for convenience.
Yes.
And so I love using these analogies because I think a lot of times there's a lot of fear for people to step into that unknown. But if they do, they will realize they have the skill set to do it. Yeah. They will see things they have never done before, they have never seen before. And it will be a
trails.
Good. Yes. Yes.
Anything else about the vision for yourself? Anything that you're...
Yeah, I would love to try and create tools and to support people to do that. So that's something that I've started thinking about in the last 6 months, more of an entrepreneurial leaning, if you like, that I haven't really thought about previously. Yeah. And so, that's something that I'm starting to think about.
That's exciting. That's really exciting. Yeah, there's a lot of great entrepreneurship happening now in public health. I feel like it's been kind of exploding. It's an exciting thing to be part of. Yeah. I think of myself as a public health entrepreneur, in addition to lots of other things that I consider myself. But that's great.
Yeah, not to be put in a box, right? You can't just, sometimes Yep. Yeah, we're
Absolutely.
more than the box that, Yep.
And you know what? Other people, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Other people can think that they're putting us in a box, and we can say, nope, that's not where I'm going to stay. I'm not going to be in your box. I don't even recognize the box. Like you think I'm in a box? I don't even recognize your box. Your box doesn't exist to me. So, no, thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, especially today. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you, and very inspiring in terms of where we go next, where we get to go next.
Thank you for the invitation. It's been a real honor to come on this podcast. I love that you created it. I love what you're doing. It's wonderful and it's important. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I want to make sure that our listeners know how to connect with you. What is the best way for them to do that?
I'm on LinkedIn, so if you just search for Wari Allison, my full name, Wari DeBois, on there, Wari DeBois Allison, but just search for Wari Allison, and I'd love to connect with you all on LinkedIn.
Yes, and we'll be sure to put all of the show notes, put all of the links in the show notes. Yeah, I think it's important to make sure that people know how to connect. Thank you again, and I hope you have a really great rest of your day.
Likewise.
And we'll be in touch.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you. There are moments when the familiar path no longer feels like the right one. There are moments when integrity asks more of us than comfort ever could. There are moments when the road ahead is uncertain, but we take the next step anyway. Dr. Wari Allison reminds us that courage isn't just about taking risks. It's about trusting ourselves enough to choose a path aligned with our values, even when no one else has gone that way before. Because the road less traveled isn't valuable simply because it's different. It's valuable when it leads us closer to who we are, what we value, and the impact we're here to make. If this conversation resonated with you, you'll find ways to connect with Dr. Wari Allison and with Courageous Public Health in the show notes. Until our next episode, stay courageous.
Thank you for listening to the Courageous Public Health podcast. Visit courageouspublichealth.com to find the show notes for each episode and learn how to connect with us.